to my channel, Ghost of Eregion. I'm Sal, and today I'm going to be showcasing and breaking down my Holy Knight Bulwark build. I have tested it, and it's a really fun build to play with. It practically has unlimited weapon tech charge and can deal out and take a ton of damage. It was able to reach Atot 30 Boonless as well, with no banners or lifestones being used throughout the run. Let's jump right into it and start breaking it down. First up, we have our primary weapon, the Rosary, which is an epic longsword that can be found anywhere. For this build, I have a primal, and I do recommend a primal for this build, but a regular Rosary will still get the job done. For our primary, we receive a 25% weapon tech charge boost every time we hit an enemy with our Southern technique. Secondaries you would ideally want on this are crit chance, double that, crit damage, weapon tech damage, or whatever elemental damage your Rosary has. For this build, I went with the fire element, so I will be inflicting fire damage and ignite. Our secondary weapon is a Seath, a simple yet powerful weapon. It's an epic longsword that can be found anywhere. Its primary gives us the greater blessing of luck, which increases our crit chance. Secondaries you would ideally want on this are the same as the Rosary, with emphasis on crit chance. Next up is our Lion Talisman. This is going to give us weapon charge every time we crit. Mine is a primal, but you don't need a primal for this build to work, although it does help. Secondaries you would ideally want are crit chance and crit damage. Next, we have our amulet, the Kalabas Legacy, which can only be found when fighting Kurgani from the Fire and Darkness DLC. This is a double primary amulet, and the two primaries we want for this build are Apply the Mark of Weakness when we inflict ailments, and the Amulet of the Betrayer primary, which, when we are reduced to 0 health, instead we become invulnerable for 5 seconds and are reduced to 1 health. On to the rings. First is our Eye of the Dragon, which is one of the most important rings in the game. This is not only going to give us overhealth retention in its primary, but it also gives us overhealth when we defeat an enemy, and makes our weapon technique inflict ailments. Secondaries you want for this are overhealth gained in your elemental damage. Unfortunately, I didn't roll anything fire related for my Eye of the Dragons, so I just have overhealth gained. On to our Dusk Lord's Signet, which exposes the enemy's weak points whenever we inflict an ailment, and weapon techniques inflict ailments. Secondaries you want on this are weak point damage, weapon tech charge speed, you want to double that, rampage bonus damage, or your respective elemental damage. On to the banner, which is a standard of the Golden Lion. This can be found anywhere. Mine is a primal, but you don't need a primal for this build to work. Its primary gives us weapon tech charge speed. Secondaries you want are weak point damage, rampage bonus damage, crit damage, and weapon tech damage. Now, last but not least, is our Lifestone, the Restorative Sun Drop, which can drop anywhere, and this just gives us a base 53% fire damage boost. Again, for secondaries, you either want weak point damage, rampage bonus damage, weapon tech damage, or your respective elemental damage. Now, before we move on to our augments, let's take a look at a few more clips from this build's Atot 30 Boonless run. have a 15 green augment, Nightshade. This is part of a combo that I use that I will get more into later. Its primary blinds enemies whenever an attack reduces our overhealth. We will be constantly at full overhealth in this build, so this will be activating all the time. Note that it does have a 20-second cooldown. Secondaries you need on this are overhealth gained and double it. On the last upgrade, you're going to want to add 2 resistances. Now, we have our Glamour. This is a primal, but you don't need a primal to make this build work. Its primary gives us 89% damage for each type of ailment on the enemy if adjacent augments are green, which they are. Adjacent means that they are directly connected to this augment. Secondaries you want to have on this are overhealth gained, double that, and add resistances to the end or your respective element's damage. On to the most important augment in this and any build, Force Barrier. This is going to let our attacks go uninterrupted if our health, or I should say overhealth, is above 50%. We will be gaining overhealth from crits and from defeating enemies, which will constantly keep it above 50%. Secondaries you want again are overhealth gained, you want to double that and add resistances or your respective elemental damage at the end. Now we have our Black Seed. This gives us shield charge and our shield abilities deal more damage when we defeat an enemy with a weapon technique. Secondaries you want are damages for your respective element. So for me, again, that would be fire damage and damage to ignited enemies. For physical, it would be physical damage and damage to bleeding enemies, and so on. Lucid Vision is our next augment, and its primary restores health whenever we hit an enemy with our shield. Again, secondaries you want are damage for your respective element. Next up, we have a Focus, which is a primal, but you don't need a primal for this build to work. Its primary gives us overhealth on crit, and ideally you want rampage bonus damage, your elemental damage, or weapon tech damage as secondaries. Now we get into the second part of our combo for augments, and that's the White Recluse augment. This augment applies the Mark of Leeching every time an enemy is blinded. Nightshade, which I mentioned earlier, blinds enemies whenever they reduce our overhealth. With this augment, it also applies the Mark of Leeching, enabling us to heal on hit. Secondaries you would want are damages for your elemental or adding resistances. Second to last, we have Enervation. You don't have to have this augment, I'm simply using it for its secondaries. But its primary extends Arc on Fury for 1 second whenever we defeat an enemy. Secondaries again you absolutely want are damages for your respective element. Last but not least is our Paradise augment. This gives us weapon charge whenever we crit, and secondaries you would ideally want are weak point damage, weapon tech damage, rampage bonus damage, or your respective elemental damage. Now, on to our skills. Here we have our skill tree, which hasn't changed much since our last build. We're still fully spec'd into weapon techniques, soul shatter, vitality, crit chance, might, crit damage, spirit, rampage, ailments, recovery, weak points, polarity attacks, and all stats. Now you'll notice I have 4 in resistance, and that is because the last one gives us extra cap, which we do not need in this build. I also spec'd into weapon timing just because I like to do the southern weapon timing attack, and I also spec'd into immediately being able to take down a smaller enemy after parrying. Now that's all for this build. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all your support, and I'll see you next time. Take care.